Hello everyone. In the news, hydroxychloroquine and remdesivir seem like the only drugs being tested for COVID-19, which is caused by the SARS-CoV-2 virus. But the US government database, clinicaltrials.gov, gives a different picture. Worldwide, there are more than 200 drugs being tested for their effectiveness against COVID-19, COVID for short, in more than 1,000 clinical trials, mostly in North America, the European Union, and China. In this video, I will only list the names of the drugs. Feel free to look them up in clinicaltrials.gov. The different sections are timestamped below. The 200 drugs consist of many existing and approved drugs and some novel candidates. The approved drugs are tested so that the ones that are effective against COVID can be repurposed for COVID treatment. Such repurposed drugs get through clinical trial more quickly because they have proven that they are safe. As a result, all of them are already in phase 2, 3, or 4. In contrast, most of the novel drug candidates are still in phase 1 being tested for safety. All the drugs being tested fall into two functional categories. One is to target the COVID virus itself. The other is to deal with the symptoms that COVID causes. In terms of general targeting, researchers put much hope in convalescent plasma, as evidenced by the more than 100 trials on it. Of the 17 million COVID cases worldwide, there are already more than 11 million recoveries. The United States has about 5 million cases and more than 2 million recoveries. All the survivors will have antibodies against COVID. The treatment works by collecting the blood from recovered and virus-free COVID patients and separating the antibodies from the cells, then giving the antibodies to the current COVID patients. Convalescent plasma is also safe because it's from humans. The convalescent plasma approach is largely driven by nonprofit institutions and former COVID patients who volunteer and donate their plasma. In the US, the National COVID-19 Convalescent Plasma Project is a collaboration between Michigan State University, Johns Hopkins, Mount Sinai, Washington University, Mayo Clinic, and the Albert Einstein College of Medicine. Another strategy is to stimulate the immune system. There's data showing that people with a compromised immune system are more vulnerable to COVID. So if we can bolster their immune system, they may be more likely to recover. Researchers are testing if the substance secreted by immune T cells will strengthen the immune system. They are also testing T cells. ALS, also known as Lou Gehrig's disease, has Stephen Hawking as one of its most famous patients. One study shows that ALS patients whose immune system is compromised survive longer if they are given T cells. The next general targeting strategy is to use other antiviral drugs. Since many antiviral drugs work against more than one type of virus, researchers want to see if they will also work against COVID. For example, the drug against the influenza and hepatitis C virus and some general antiviral drugs. Viruses are and behave very differently from bacteria, parasites, and fungus. So in theory, the drugs against the non-virus microbes may not work on viruses, but we might just well test them. Anti-parasite drugs include ones for tapeworm and roundworms, and malarial drugs, such as artemisinin, the Nobel Prize-winning drug discovered by Tu Youyou of China. Hydroxychloroquine had more than 200 trials, but due to the recent unfavorable data, the US FDA has revoked its emergency use and the WHO has discontinued its trials. Also, drugs against bacteria and fungus are tested. Another strategy is to target the specific phases of the COVID life cycle. The COVID virus needs to enter a cell, replicate its genome, make necessary proteins, assemble the different parts into functional viruses, then get out of the cells. Blocking any of these steps will be useful. First, drugs that would prevent entry into the cell. The spike protein on the surface of COVID binds to the ACE2 and TMPRSS2 receptor on the cell surface so that the virus can enter. Therefore, these two interactions can be targeted. Captopril, a blood pressure drug, frees up more ACE to bind to the ACE2 receptor so that there are fewer ACE2 receptors for COVID to dock and enter. Chemostat mesylate, which is used to treat the inflammation of pancreas, can disrupt the interaction between COVID and the TMPRSS2 receptor. Lastly, simvastatin blocks virus from entering the cell even after the docking is successful. When the virus is already in the cell, we can target the replication of its genome. The most famous inhibitor is Remdesivir, which has been successful against the Ebola virus in humans and MERS and SARS in animals. Remdesivir has more than 30 trials, and the data was good enough that in May 2020, the FDA approved it for emergency use. But remdesivir is somewhat limited. For patients with milder symptoms, it can shorten their hospital stay significantly, but for the more serious patients who need oxygen or mechanical ventilation, it is less effective. Also being tested are drugs that inhibit the replication of hepatitis B and C, HIV, and influenza virus. After replicating its genome and making viral proteins, the viral proteins still need to be cleaved into smaller proteins by an enzyme called protease before viruses are successfully assembled. Therefore, inhibiting the cleaving enzyme, the protease, can block virus assembly. Lopinavir and ritonavir are HIV protease inhibitors that have worked against SARS and MERS. But recently, the WHO has concluded that they are not effective against COVID and discontinued their trials. Still being tested are protease inhibitors against HIV and hepatitis C. Lastly, we can try to prevent fully assembled viruses from exiting the cell. Regeneron is testing 2 novel drugs for this. It is not enough to just treat the patients with antiviral drugs, because COVID causes many different and often serious symptoms. COVID unleashes cytokine storms, which is the immune system overreacting. The cytokine storm will lead to the uncontrolled division of immune cells and inflammation, cascading into problems like blood clotting, fluids in the lungs, the destruction of red blood cells, reduced oxygen supply, and damage to organs such as lungs, heart, and brain. Researchers look to other diseases that have the same symptoms as COVID and hope that drugs for these diseases would also work on COVID. First, drugs that suppress the cytokine storm and reduce inflammation. Back in 2004, aggressive hormone therapy was used to treat cytokine storm caused by the SARS virus. The therapy was successful but had serious side effects such as bone damage. According to reports from China Daily and Reuters, as a result, many SARS survivors became handicapped for life. Researchers are testing a lower dose of hormone, non-hormone anti-inflammatory drugs, also immunosuppressants, which suppress the immune system and are used in organ transplantation to prevent organ rejection, or immunomodulants, drugs that temper the cytokine storm without shutting down the immune system. They are used to treat many different diseases, from multiple sclerosis to diabetes. The cytokine storm unleashed by COVID causes uncontrolled division of immune cells. Diseases such as arthritis, fibrosis, and cancer have the same problem, so their drugs may reduce the immune cell proliferation in COVID patients. Also being tested are drugs used to treat erectile dysfunction, familial Mediterranean fever, alcoholism, hypertension or high blood pressure, or bacterial infections. Blood clotting is also a problem. Studies show that COVID-19 patients have blood clots that often lead to stroke or heart attack. In addition, the blood clots may damage organs like lungs, liver, or kidneys by clogging their blood vessels. Abnormal blood clotting also causes cytokine storms and continues a vicious cycle of immune overreaction. Many anticoagulants or anti-blood clotting drugs are being tested. The ones we are most familiar with will be ibuprofen, which is in Motrin. If you lower the blood pressure, you will lower the risk of blood clotting and stroke. Irregular heartbeat is linked to COVID. Therefore, treating irregular heartbeat may also treat COVID. Drugs that reduce the risk of heart disease, including oxytocin, aka the love hormone, are tested. We also need to protect the red blood cells. There's data showing that COVID attacks the hemoglobin in red blood cells and affect oxygen delivery. This way, COVID may also overload the cells and tissues with unused iron, causing iron overdose and blood clotting. Researchers want to see if the drugs that protect red blood cells help make hemoglobin or prevent iron overdose will be helpful. In addition, we need to protect the lungs. The lungs of COVID patients are attacked by the immune system and may not get enough oxygen. The drugs that protect the lung from immune cells, stem cells that help repair the lungs, drugs that reduce lung dysfunction, support patients on ventilators and prevent their lungs from collapsing, and drugs that improve oxygen delivery are being tested. For example, Viagra, which relaxes blood vessels, can increase blood flow and oxygen delivery. Also, during the 2004 SARS epidemic, nitric oxide was found to improve oxygen delivery and shorten the time a patient spent on a ventilator. During a cytokine storm, along with the immune cells, a lot of fluids will leak out of the blood vessel. As a result, a thick liquid or mucus will form in the lungs. The mucus will block out the oxygen and cause the patient to suffocate. Cystic fibrosis patients have the same problem with mucus, so several cystic fibrosis drugs are being tested. Meanwhile, bevacizumab can prevent the immune cells from leaking out of the blood vessels and reduce the amount of lung mucus. Now we're done talking about the drugs. Let's talk money. Because the repurposed drugs are overall less profitable, public or nonprofit institutions like universities or hospitals are doing most of these trials. On the other hand, since novel drugs have higher earning potential and intellectual property complications, the drug companies are testing them. Because most of the COVID trials are testing repurposed drugs and the public institutions are doing them, they are the major driver of drug development here. This is in contrast to the usual drug development, which is driven by private investment and for-profit companies. In conclusion, of the 200 plus drugs being tested, some show promise, but they are not perfect. Hydroxychloroquine is not effective. Remdesivir is effective, but has its limits. Therefore, we need to keep testing more drugs. All in all, we're going to need both the repurposed and novel drugs as well as vaccines to fight COVID. Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, and share.